All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Australian Liberty Network for the starting of our coverage of the Australian 2022 federal election. I'm joined today by Gerrie, one of our contributors and also the UAP candidate for Lily. I want to get your thoughts on Scott Morrison calling an election date on the 21st as opposed to calling it on the 14th and why you think he's called that later date. Because you're a bit more in touch with that sort of things than I am, because you're on the ground running a campaign.
Well, I think it was always going to be the last day that he could call it. So I'm assuming it's to give him more time. I mean, if it had been the 14th, that's 5 weeks. And the saying is a week is a very long time in politics, although this day and age that could be shrunk down to 1 day. Yeah. There was a bit of back and forth among many people and the media, which day it would be. But the 21st it is. So we've got 6 weeks, a 6-week campaign, which is generally what it is. So it's boots on the ground now.
How long was Turnbull? Was that 55 days, I think, for Turnbull? So it's definitely a shorter campaign.
I actually can't remember, but it may be right. It might have been 5 weeks. I don't know that we've had many 4-week campaigns in Australia. They're generally 6 weeks.
Yeah, no, I'm saying Turnbull was like 50. I'm pretty sure it was 55 days. So
yeah,
like 7 or 8 weeks because it was double. I guess because that was 2016, so double dissolution election, both houses. So I guess it was longer because of that.
You could be right. It was because that was unusual that we were. Yes, yeah, you're correct. Because it did
it's definitely shorter than it was back 2016. I guess maybe because it's COVID.
Well, I just think it's very unusual times. There's a lot of criticism around Scott Morrison. Maybe it gives them, there could be the argument that it gives the Liberals more time for Albanese to slip up. I'm kind of recalling here the Mark Latham handshake. Remember that? Yeah. Perhaps there's always that, because I actually do think a day is a long time in politics. So
well, last time round it was Bill Shorten's election to lose, and he lost. So potentially they're waiting for that to happen again, because I think the Liberals have only been ahead in polling for 2 of the last 5 elections, and they've won every time. But they're only ahead in polling since 2013. I'm pretty sure.
I mean, I don't think it's the same election as that he ran, that Shorten ran. I'm picking up the same theme of hubris, though. There's quite a lot of photographs of Albanese flanked by some of his senior cabinet colleagues or shadow cabinet colleagues, and very much like that photo of the infamous "We're Ready" photo that Shorten did with flanked by his senior colleagues. I'm picking that up. It's very strange. In fact, I think Albanese is doing even more of that. Definitely changed his look, very presidential style that he's running. And he's clamping down clearly on the bus. No journalists can go on the bus unless they're triple jabbed and wearing an N95 mask. They're being, the precautions. The media reported it as a safety measure for him not to contract COVID while they are campaigning, so that there's no spanner.
I think it's weird as well. Suddenly all these restrictions are changing because we've got the election coming up. So Palaszczuk's lifted the vaccine mandate for hospitality venues in Queensland, for example, on April the 14th, right before Easter and before a federal election. So suddenly all these Labor premiers, because it's literally every state now except New South Wales and Victoria and Tasmania, plus both territories, are all Labor. So 6 of 8 are Labor. Then they're all suddenly changing their tune. It was a little about public safety. So compare this to You remember the 2020 state election and council election in Queensland, and compared the measures they're taking for COVID back then compared to now. And there are more cases now than there were back then. But apparently we can ease restrictions.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's the same thing they did in Victoria, isn't it? When they shut the whole state down over 2 cases or whatever it was. I mean, some people may look at it as intriguing. Some may say, great, the mandates are all over. The cynic in me says very different. This is clearly a strategic move for the election. Not everything is off the table. There are so many anomalies in all of this. It makes me think of that the recent estimates hearing where Jared Rennick was grilling Paul Kelly over the biosecurity of the International Health Agreement and why Australians can't travel overseas. See, that hasn't been lifted. And the answer surprisingly came that it really wasn't to do with health. It was to do because we signed an international health agreement so we would protect other countries. And these things are still there. But what was interesting at the end of his statement, he said that the Biosecurity Act, it's still in there, although the International Health Agreement isn't operating under emergency status. So that has raised quite a few questions. I find that odd. So it's like that. Is it the Jiu-Jitsu move where they squeeze, they let go, they squeeze, they let go? That may sound cynical, but they've done this one after the other. Like Labor, the South Australia dropped a lot of those restrictions, not all of them, all the mandates on certain professions over there. Well, masks were going, weren't they, in WA? Everything's loosening off for this. But like you said, in 2020, in the Queensland Council elections, the volunteers from all the parties were not allowed to go to the polling booths. And scrutineers were not allowed to count the votes that night. So it is rather mysterious.
And still Western Australia as well. Western Australians can leave to Bali, for example, but we can't cross the border to get across the land border in Western Australia. So a couple of days ago, a Western Australian plane took off full of passengers going for holidays in Bali, right? Tim Dillon, American comedian, unvaccinated, he's coming into Perth next month to do a comedy show. But we can't cross that border. Triple vax Australians can't cross the land border of Western Australia. So it is very weird timing for all these restrictions to ease right before an election. It'll be interesting if people will remember this in November when Dan Andrews is up for election in Victoria. It'll be interesting to see if they do the exact same thing back then in November as they're doing right now. And hopefully people will work it out and that this is just a political ploy to win votes. I
don't know. The sad thing is we're living in a time of where everyone's bamboozled and we're just most people just try to get from one day to the next. And that is the tragedy of this 24/7 world we live in, of knowing everything. Yeah, it is. Look, it's mysterious. I don't trust them doing all this, releasing this. This is a release of the chokehold. My concern is what happens before the election. Are they going to start pushing postal votes at the last minute? Are we going to have a new wave that suddenly comes in? And that is not an unusual thought because it happened. We've got precedent in Queensland Council 2020. So it's there, that precedent. Although it would be very difficult to do that Australia-wide.
I think I read somewhere that they're going to make it easy to do telephone voting. I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere.
They are.
The telephone voting is going to be easier.
No, a few of us have questioned, when I say us, people I know just ordinary people, nobody in UAP, for example, this is people I know as well, have questioned the validity of how that's going to work, because how on earth do you identify someone that they are that person on the phone? We've been told that there'll be a double person, like a double verification, but that still doesn't solve that. I think I don't like the idea at all that it's open to everybody. It was there for the vision impaired, and that is absolutely the way that it should remain, unless, there was a dire circumstances. But even then, I can't see that that's open to anything other than fraught problems.
Well, remember all the government robocalls? It was it 2019? All the robocall stuff that the government was being accused of, and now they're doing telephone voting, which is similar. It's also the government running it, so it's not going to be well organised, definitely, and it'll be interesting to see how they count it on election night.
But how would it be handled, though? The volume of telephone calls, there will be, they've put enough fear into the population as it is around COVID, and that fear would translate to quite a significant portion of perhaps elderly people who would see a way out, and it's safer. They don't have to go out. I just don't know how the telephone lines would handle it for a start, as well as everything else we just spoke about before. But it is there. They did pass the legislation. I believe it was passed in February to allow that to happen. And the AEC told a few of us who questioned them that it's definitely been looked at and I guess prepared for.
Yeah, it definitely is. Definitely is very odd. What do you think about an outcome for this election now that George Christensen has resigned as of the 7th and said he's going to be independent for the next month and a half, and then he's out for good? So what do you think is going to happen now that changes up the dynamics of the government?
Well, yeah, that I guess he's left the party though completely now. He's resigned from the LNP. Where that leaves them, well, if the Liberals do think that they have a chance, they're going to have to win his seat back. So, but yeah, that's a real blow. Just on George, his valedictory speech was the finest I've heard. The honesty, authenticity, all of the things that the Parliament needs is going with him. There's only a few of them left in there that are like George, which is very sad. We actually need all those, or what did he call it? I love it. Political mongrel. We need more political mongrels in the Parliament.
So we've got, I think, I have seen parts of the valedictory speech, yes.
It's very good.
We're looking at right now the government having 75 of 151, so that's a minority of one seat. Labor has 68. I think it's pretty obvious that Scott Morrison's lost the election before it's even started. So do you think we'll have Labor getting the majority, 76, or will the government bleed enough votes to the minor parties to make a hung parliament?
Honestly,
what do you expect will happen?
Honestly, Stuart, this is an unknown outcome. I just think it could be a surprise. I don't think anyone can call it. I know the commentators in the mainstream media do. They're either on one side or the other, with zero regard to any of the minor parties or UAP, which can hardly be considered minor really as far as the size of the party goes. But it is a very, I think I heard yesterday that there's currently 31%, I believe yesterday they said, do not know, they're not voting for Labor or Liberal. So it all comes down to how much of that rusted on vote that the Labor and Liberal parties have. It was always around 30%, used to be 33%, they said, about had that rusted on, then it dropped to 30%. I read a little while ago that that's come down to around 27 or something around there, that rusted on. Now, I just think it's really too difficult to call, to say what the outcome is going to be. The Senate, of course, will be very interesting, and I just think that's going to be a real upset in the Senate. I can't see Labor and Liberal having anywhere running the Senate at all. Far from it. And the
The Greens already have 9 in the Senate, I guess. So that shows the power of minor parties up there right now.
Absolutely, it does, and I think that the Senate is going to be awash with, dare I say it, freedom parties, because, I stand for freedom, you stand for freedom, ALN, that's what libertarianism is, and I'm running under a freedom banner, and so is a lot of all the minor parties. We're all on the same page for that. I believe that there's going to be, we're going to see freedom parties in the Senate.
I guess the hope is that we have enough minor parties, UAP, One Nation, Katter, I guess. Lib Dems definitely, although I don't think Katter runs upper house, actually. Senator Alliance, enough votes, enough seats in the upper house to counterbalance the Greens and Labor, because I guess the concern right now is that Greens and Labor could form a coalition in the Senate to get bills passed. Because the Greens are at 9 senators right now. So I guess the question is, can the Greens keep those 9? And can enough minor parties get enough seats to counterbalance that Greens-Labor coalition?
How many Greens are running on this half election in the Senate? How many are up for re-election?
Good question.
Yeah, I didn't check either, because I
haven't. Yeah,
I might go and have a dig on that as well. But I could see them losing a couple, maybe more, to the freedom parties. There's been a big upset in the Green Party across the board between the especially around the vaccination issue. So, and I've actually met people who vote Green, spoken to them, as a lot of people I know have as well, and it was like a deciding factor. See, it's interesting because the Greens don't give all their preferences to the Labor Party either when we're talking back to lower house seats. I saw that in 2019 in some of the booths that I was looking after, that it was about 30% split of the preferences would go to the Liberal Party. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and that was back then before COVID. So lower house seats, it's difficult to say. There's a lot of swing seats up for play. Those swing seats that often are easier to, target. But I believe that UAP and the Lib Dems are going to do well in the Senate.
I've got those figures for you. It's 3 Greens up for re-election.
3?
3. New South Wales, Queensland, and South Australia. And no, sorry. Hang on, I've lost it. Tasmania is up for re-election. Victoria and Western Australia.
I think Tasmania.
All of those. Victoria, Western Australia, both left-wing states, obviously.
Victoria, they'll keep their. I can't see it there so much because Victoria is definitely our California.
Well, I mean, given that Adam Banff, the only Greens lower house MP, is from Melbourne, it basically that's a given.
Yeah. Tasmania,
Western Australia.
Tasmania, I think they're in trouble. There's some very good candidates down in Tasmania. UAP has some excellent Senate candidates standing, and I see Topher Field joined the Lib Dems and is standing with them down in Tassie. Did you see that?
Yes. But I think the problem there is, though, that at the same time, the Greens have 2 seats in the lower house. So there is support for the Greens there. So the Greens have two of how many seats are there? 25. 2 of 25 for Greens. And they had their
Interesting.
state election was last year, I think. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but this is a lot has happened since 2019. These last 2 years, and I mean, Scott Morrison on his victory speech in 2019 credited the quiet Australians. Well, I think there are going to be a lot of quiet Australians, but not the quiet ones that he's referring to. I think this is going to be an amazing election.
Going back to, well, I guess Western Australia actually as well, they lost seats. The Greens lost seats there at last year's state election. They had 4 or 5 in the upper house and they lost 3. So they're in trouble there in Western Australia, which I think is good because there's a chance there that Kate Fantanel could get elected and become one of the senators from Western Australia. But what do you think about the Greens in Queensland and their chances? Because now the Greens picked up a seat at the last state election. So do you think we could see a Green senator in Queensland?
No, I think
especially given that the Lib Dems are running Campbell Newman of all people.
That, well, these are people with profiles that have runs on the board. I believe the Greens won't. Yeah, they'll not do well in Queensland. I'm quite confident in that. Queensland is, after all, the battleground state, right? This is it. We're in the war zone here. No, I don't think the Greens will do well at all here, given the amount of people. I know quite a few Greens voters here where I live, and they won't be voting for them. It's the one issue that has polarised them. So it's just been really interesting. I mean, I know it's hard, I suppose, to do that. People say, well, when you walk into the ballot box, people who have voted a certain way all their lives, they find it too hard to not tick that box. I just believe, though, that the past 2.5 years has changed so much for so many people. And this is not an election like any other. I expect that there'll be lower house seats that will not be able to be called for quite some time. And then possibly there'll be ones that'll just be outright changed.
Yeah, I think you'll see seats go everywhere. Basically, I think you'll see. I reckon the Libs pick up seats from Labor, especially in Victoria. Labor will pick up seats from the Libs in South Australia, Western Australia. I think it's going to be going every which way for seats. Usually, it's not like that, but I reckon you're going to have seats going every which way when it comes to this election. The one thing that I think is certain though is that Scott Morrison is gone after this election. He won't if he wins re-election in Cook, which isn't guaranteed. I don't think he'll stay in charge of the Liberal Party because I think they're toast. They've been in office for what, 9 years? No, yeah, nine years now since 2013. And I think Australians sick of Scott Morrison.
It's just been too turbulent. It's not even just about him. What they did, doing what they swore they'd never do, that Labor did to leaders. I don't know how the public have tolerated that for as long as what they have. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Really, I saw that Albanese apparently pretty well claimed all of the North Brisbane seats last week, except Petrie, he said, that they'd come close. But the others, he said, they're ours. Now, I just don't think it behoves anybody to go down that road, claiming that they know how everybody feels. The last 2 years have, I think, will reveal more intrigue and I think a bit of a shock to the major parties. I hope it does. It has to, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because the duopoly is not serving this country. That's why we're seeing so many people put up their hands for the freedom parties to do this. So, yeah, I think it's going to deliver some shocks, quite frankly.
Yeah, I reckon Petrie. Yeah, I don't expect that to go away, but I think that makes sense that Petrie would be a Liberal seat. I know obviously you are also in North Brisbane, so I'm sure you've got a better feel on the ground than I do about North Brisbane. But I
Yeah,
do
well,
think that that'll be a battleground area. I don't think he's correct. I don't think it'll all go Labor. I reckon Labor will definitely keep some seats there. I don't know if they're picking any up, but I don't think you're going to see every seat there go to Labor. I definitely hope that Dilly doesn't. I hope that your seat obviously doesn't go to Labor. Petrie obviously won't go to Labor. So I think it's not a safe call by Albanese there.
I can't, it's just quite unbelievable that he would make such, again, it's hubris. I mean, how can they afford, I honestly don't know how they can still believe that they can afford to display that amount of hubris. That clearly they must believe that everybody, or the majority, 90% of people actually are on their side. It's not like that on the ground, not from what I'm seeing, not from what people I know are seeing. It's just not, which is why it's dangerous for anybody to claim anything in
I
this
guess
environment.
the big question will be what happens in Victoria, because we know that what some states will do. The question will be what happens in Victoria and in Western Australia. New South Wales will obviously stay Liberal. South Australia, I don't see that going. I don't see that changing what it is right now. But I think the two big battleground states we'll see. No, I don't think Queensland is the battleground state. I think the battleground state is Victoria.
Do you?
Because I think Victoria would. I think all eyes will be in Victoria, because whatever happens there will affect the November election, because
Oh,
their
yeah,
state
no,
election is later this year.
true.
So I think Victoria is the state to watch, because what happens here
Definitely,
federally will
yeah.
help determine what happens with Dan Andrews.
Absolutely agree with you. It is important, but I still think that Queensland can still hold that title, because I just think Queensland, well, we've got a history of it, and that both the leaders are up here all the time. They need to win Queensland. There's so many, like Petrie, for example, used to be the bellwether seat for a long time, but I don't think it has that mantle anymore. But there's so many shifts. You see, in the seat of Lily, where I am, that was always Labor held. It only was ever held by the Liberals once for one term back in the 90s. I forget exactly what year. Might have been 96 when Howard won, but
Howard, yeah.
yeah, it was that year. Then it went back to Labor again, and it was always very safe. And 2019, the Liberals won that handsomely on primaries, and 1,290 votes, 0.6% is what Labor hold this seat for. So that's what I'm saying. It's nonsense to try to claim anything in environments where it's shifting sands. So this once very, very safe Labor seat cannot just be taken for granted as always a Labor seat, because actually not. I wouldn't call it a Labor seat anyway, because the Liberals won it on primaries quite handsomely. And the Greens put them over. So as I said, getting back to what I said before, I know Greens around in this electorate who won't vote that way again. And for them, the polarising issue was the vaccination mandates, or the vaccination mandates. So we don't know. So you can't say it's a safe one for either of them, which is odd because they're claiming it's safe. Lily's never mentioned in the Labor rhetoric because I think they believe it's just a slam dunk. Again, 0.6% would not say to me that that's a slam dunk. I don't know. Do you agree or not agree? 0.6%.
Yeah, very, very marginal. I think when it comes to North Brisbane, that's definitely some of the most marginal seats. Having said that, Petrie is a bellwether seat, has been since Keating. Keating? Yes, since Keating and Hawke. So I reckon if Liberal Party if he thinks the Liberal Party can keep Petrie, it could be bad for the Labor Party, because that's a bellwether state.
That's it. That's the thing. And Luke Howarth increased the margin considerably at the last election. So that used to be a really tight, highly marginal seat for a long time as well. And that's pushed right out now to quite safe, reasonably safe. And the opposite happened here in Lilly. So that's the thing. It's shifting sands. It's just moving all of the time. That's why it's really, really difficult for any of them. It's just going to be fascinating. Just absolutely fascinating.
Lilly is Wayne Swan's old seat, correct?
Mm.
Yeah. I can definitely see that being a very marginal seat, and it does show that North Queensland will be one of the battlegrounds of the election. It'll be there, it'll be Victoria, and it'll be Western Australia. And I think Western Australia is why I say why I think that'll be a battleground state, is because they were pretty easily a Liberal state last time, 2019. But then at the state election, you had a 15% swing towards Labor, towards Mark McGowan. So I think it'll be watching Victoria, Queensland, and Western Australia. I don't think South Australia is going to come into play much. I don't expect much change there. New South Wales, I reckon that'll stay Liberal national. Tasmania, it's like 50-50 right now, I'm pretty sure. It's like 2 seats Labor, 3 seats Liberal, or the other way around. But I don't think you see much change there either, because that reflects state level politics. But yes, I think the states of the 3 Labor premiers are going to be the states to watch.
Yeah, it's just going to be it's fascinating. Fascinating. The other 2, I think it's Macquarie and Bass, are the 2. The top 3 marginal seats in the country are Macquarie, Bass, and Lilly. So
Bass is Tasmania, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I know in Macquarie that there's been a lot of job losses and knock-on effects and dramatic adverse effects from mandates there. So that's going to be an interesting seat. And I noticed that some of the media that I have seen has been focusing on Macquarie first and then Bass. So, yeah, it's an interesting strategy that I'm seeing play out, very different to what I've seen before.
Macquarie's near Cook, right? Isn't it?
Yes, more inner, western area of Sydney, yeah.
Okay.
Hit hard by the mandates.
Yeah, because Western Australia was pretty hardly hit. Western New South Wales Australia was pretty hard hit by the mandates compared to Eastern Sydney.
Yeah, they do.
Is that currently Liberal?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Reid is another one. That is going to be an interesting seat to watch as well, because they had the Liberal guy there. He stood down the last election. He was a Morrison ally, the guy who owns the pubs. Forget his name. But that's going to be another interesting seat to watch. Takes in Burwood and Strathfield and all around there in the inner west.
And I think that says something, that 2 of those seats that you've mentioned, 2 of those 4 seats to watch, are Labor Premier seats. Because obviously Bass being Victoria and Petrie and Lilly being Queensland. And then you've got 2 in Sydney, which I think it'll be interesting to see Sydney and how that's affected by the Liberal Party having lockdowns there, and whether that'll affect their votes. But I reckon the rest of the Sydney is the rest of the state, rest of New South Wales is pretty certain. I don't think it's I think New England, I don't think will switch. People are saying that New England might switch. I reckon they're still going to stay the same. I don't expect much of a change there. I've heard people say that New England will flip.
Where there won't be switches, there's going to be disruption. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep. Without a doubt. Anyway, We will see. It's 6 weeks away,
Yes.
so another 2 weeks and I'll be on my feet again. So then it'll be. I'm glad it was the 21st. Thank you, Scott. It gave me some more time so I can be back on my feet properly.
And not just that, next weekend's Easter, so you're not going to get campaigning there anyway. So that's just 1 week. That's just 1 weekend that you lose then. And that weekend's actually that weekend is Anzac Day weekend.
Yes.
So have fun with that.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Yeah, you've got to be, sensible and very mindful of campaigning around certain things. You just don't do that.
Yes.
Absolutely. Anyone who would just, I don't understand. All right.
Anyway, thank you and best of luck.
Thanks, Stuart. And we will talk again soon.
Sure.
Bye.